Welcome. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make your own vocabulary lists so you can study for yourself in the Greek New Testament study app. So I'm going to show this to you, unlike most of the other videos, in landscape mode, because it just gives us a little more screen real estate to work with. Most of the things in the program actually work better in portrait mode, but this is one that I find works better in landscape. I'm also going to show this to you running in Windows, because I'm going to type a bunch of things in, and I would so much rather type on my keyboard than type on the little keyboard on my phone, but it works exactly the same way in desktops and mobile. So here we are, we've got the program, we're on the vocabulary page. We get that by clicking down here on the vocabulary icon at the navigation bar at the bottom. You see it's lit up in blue, so you know that's where we are. And the first thing we're going to do is make a new list. So to do that, first you click on the edit button up here in the upper right, and then you click on the plus that appears in the upper left. We're now in edit mode. We have two options. We can create a new list, or we can import a shared list. Check out the video on exporting and importing lists if you want to see more about how to do that, especially if you've created some lists that you want to share elsewhere. But in this case, we're going to create a new list. So I'm preaching through 1 Peter right now. So let's make a new list for the vocabulary of 1 Peter. So I'm going to call this 1 Peter. And I click create, and then there it is. And as you know, if you've checked out the other videos, you can click on these little drag bars here, and I could move this around if I want, but I'm happy to have it at the beginning. Now that I'm done, I click the done button up here in the upper right to say that I'm done, take it out of edit mode. Now I'm going to click on this line we've just created, and I'm going to go into the vocabulary list that we created, 1 Peter, but of course, there's nothing here. Again, check out the video on studying vocabulary to see normally this would be propagated with all of the various groups that we've created. We haven't created any yet, so let's do that. We do it the same way we did before. Click the edit button. Then you'll notice now we get this plus, click the plus, and again, we get the same options we had before. We can create a new group, or we can import a shared group. Again, we're going to create a new group. So I click that, and this takes us to the vocabulary creator page. And I'm showing this to you up in landscape mode again, because it gives us a whole lot more real estate on the right side to see the words we're creating. So notice up here at the beginning, we could create words by frequency, or we can actually create words manually. We can just type words in. I'll show you that in a moment. For now, let's stick with frequency, and you have to make some options. We can select words from the whole Greek New Testament, all the books. But in this case, I'm studying 1 Peter, so let's scroll down and choose 1 Peter. Now, if you choose any books, the chapter icon menu lights up. So I could choose all the chapters of 1 Peter, or I could choose to study vocabulary from just a particular chapter. In this case, I want to do all of them, and I can study word types. So again, we've seen this before. Verbs, nouns, adjectives, or miscellaneous, which is everything other than verbs, nouns, and adjectives. I'm going to leave it as all words because that's what I want. And so you've got these two options. Notice the first option, frequency and selection. So our selection is 1 Peter, all chapters, all words. And I'm going to say I want to see all those words. I want to see any word from that appears at one time to appears all the time. Now, notice these are both in blue, as you've probably seen in the program. Most things in blue you can click on to change them. So I could change the minimum here by clicking on this, and this gives me some sliders for minimum and maximum. I'm going to click OK. If you click on all, you're going to get the same thing. These are the two sliders here, minimum and maximum. And I could change this and say, I only want to see things that are, let's say 200. So you can drag the slider around. Also, if you click below it, you'll go down by 1. In fact, I could even click here on maximum, if I could click on minimum, or I can click on the number if I want to change it. I could say, I want to see words that appear between 100 and 200 times. You could set this however you want. In this case, I want all the words. So I'm going to drag the minimum all the way to the left, and I'm going to drag the maximum all the way to the right. Now you notice when you get all the way to the right, it says all. 1 to the left of that is 500. That's the highest number you can choose. After that, we're at all, and I'm just going to leave it at that. So now I'm going to look at all the words from 1 Peter, any word that appears at all in this book. Now we come down here and we create the button Create List. And you see, here we go. Here's our list. Here's all the words that appear in 1 Peter. We're told there's 543 in different words in 1 Peter, and I can change here in the sort results how I see them. Right now we're looking at them alphabetically, so we start with Abraham, and we could scroll down to the bottom. In this case, let's change it. Let's do descending. That'll show us what's at the top. Hoste, that's not surprising. We could view the most common words, count descending, etc., and so on. So when you're here, you may want to say, oh, I don't really want to study the article. I know that. If you click on this red trash can, you'll remove that from the list. Same thing for Kai. I'm not really sure about that. The same thing for Sue. This is the pronoun. I already know those. Since this is count descending, I could also look through this and say, I really already know everything up until, about 15 words that appear 15 times or more. So I could come back here and say, instead of maximum being all, I could say maximum being 15. Remember, this is the number of times in the selection, not the number of times they appear in the whole Bible, because we chose 1 Peter. So I'm going to say 1 through 15. I'm going to hit Create List. And you notice now we're still in count descending. So we're getting words that appear 15 times and less. And maybe I'll say, I already know A for if. We'll get rid of that. Once I've got the list like this, then I click the Save button to create groups. So this tells me I need to give this a name. And I'm going to call this, very cleverly, 1 Peter Vocab. So if I could spell. So that's the name of our group. Now notice at the moment, I'm going to create one group of 527 words. Remember, that's how many words there are here, 527. I'm going to create one group of 527 words. That's actually pretty big. I don't want to study that many words. In fact, I don't want to study more than about 20 words at a time. So I'm going to click this slider and start dragging it. And you see, it's going to create different groups. So I'm going to slide it here. I'm going to create 26 groups, which will have 20 or 21 words each. That's about what I want. Having done that, you notice the split groups by lights up, because now I have to choose, okay, how do I want these groups done by? You can arrange them randomly, meaning every group will just get a random random set of words. But also you can do all the same sort item ways that we've done before. So you could have the first group could be alphabetical, starting with the alphas all the way to the omegas. Or one thing I often want to do is count descending, meaning the first group is going to have the most common words. The second group is going to have the second most common words. I click Create. It creates them, and boom. Now here we are back in 1 Peter, and we've got all these different groups. And if you've looked at this before, then we can go in and examine these words. And sure enough, these are our most common words. These are the words that appear most common in the book of 1 Peter. If we go back and look at number 2, you notice I gave it the name 1 Peter Vocab, and the program has added dash, 01, 02, etc., all the way down. We can go through and look at all of these. Right? But let's imagine that I don't necessarily want to study them this way, because I don't know if you noticed or not, but there were some other ways we could have saved them. So I'm actually going to go back here, and I'm going to delete this group. Edit, I click on this red half circle. I click delete. It says, are you sure I want to do that? Yep. And I'm just going to add the group back again. So I'm going to call it 1 Peter, hit create, done, go into 1 Peter. There's nothing here. Edit plus create. Same thing. I'm going to scroll down to 1 Peter. I want all the words, create the list. Here we are, our 543 words again. Right? But I could say, okay, I'm not sure about that. I think I liked what I did before. Let's scroll down and just go to 15 times. Click OK, create the list. Okay, 528. And let's do the same thing we did. We don't need to remember A. In fact, let's say we don't need to remember May either. So here we are. We have 526 words. I click Save. Now, notice this time I'm going to call it the same thing, 1 Peter Vocab. And again, I'll spell it incorrectly. You see this little line right here, create groups by chapters. So the last time we split how we looked at the words, and it didn't matter where they appeared in the book. But if you click this, then this changes how things are saved. This will now go through the book, and it will show you the words that appear in chapter 1 that meet your criteria. Then it will go through and show you the words in chapter 2 that meet your criteria that you haven't already seen. And again, you have to choose how you want it. Now, do you want one group per chapter? Meaning, do you want to see all the words that appear in chapter 1 in a group, then all the words that appear in chapter 2, which you've not already seen in chapter 1, then all the words that appear in chapter 3 that you've not already seen in chapters 1 or 2, Or you could change it. We could say, really, again, I don't want more than 20 words in any group. And if I do that, then I have to say, well, within those groups, remember, these groups are per chapter. How do I want to see them? Same thing. I want count descending. So I want the most common words in the book of 1 Peter to appear in the first group. But again, these will only be words that appear in chapter 1. So I click create. And notice now it's going through saving the chapters. And so we have 1 Peter. That's what I called the group. But now we have chapter 1. And notice it's created a number of groups within chapter 1. It's created 9 groups. So there's 9 groups of 20 words. That tells us there's 180 unique words in chapter 1. Then here we are in chapter 2. Well, obviously we don't need 9 groups in chapter 2 because there's not 180 new words in chapter 2. There's 6 times 20. There's 120 new words in chapter 2. You can see we can go all the way through, and it will go all the way down until we get to chapter 5, where there's 58 words in chapter 5 that you haven't ever seen before in the book. This is all the exact same words that you would have done if we'd simply done it by just saying, okay, I want to see the most common words. I don't care where they appear. But it rearranges how you see them. So this can be helpful if you want to study by chapter. You're going to see the words in 1 Peter that go by chapter. Now, there's one other thing you can do. And again, I'm going to go back and delete this and recreate it to show it to you. So I'm going to delete what we just created in 1 Peter. Yep, I'm sure. I'm going to add one back, cleverly call it 1 Peter, create it, done, go into it. It's empty again because it's brand new, edit, plus, create new groups. I'm going to do the same thing I just did. I'm going to go into 1 Peter, and I'm going to say, well, if I want to see all words, then here they are, the 543 words. But let's suppose that you're already studying your Greek vocabulary. Let's suppose you already know all the words in the Greek Bible down to words that appear 20 times. So that's what this second list does right here, this checkbox. I'm going to check frequency in all books. See, the top one's frequency in selection. So that's how often they appear in 1 Peter. But I want to know how often they appear anywhere. I'm going to click on one of these two. I get this same line. But I'm going to say, no, I already know every word in the Bible down to 20, so I just want to see words that are from 1 to 19 in the whole Bible. So this time, instead of changing what I see in Peter, which is, I don't care what the word is and how often the word appears in Peter, I want words that appear less than 20 times anywhere in the Bible. Now when I create list, notice there's 292 words in Peter which appear less than 20 times in the entire Bible. And again, like we're looking at, count descending. So you see, this the word that appears most commonly in Peter, that is the least common in the whole Bible. It appears 6 times in Peter. We could go look and see how often that word appears everywhere else. If you're familiar with the search page, you can go over to search and type this word in, or we can actually click on this word and it'll take us. It appears 13 times in the whole Bible, and 6 of those are here in Peter. So almost half of its usage in the scripture is here in 1 Peter. Now again, I want to save this, so I click save. I have the same options I had before, right? I'm going to call this 1 Peter vocab. Oh, I'm going to misspell it again a third time. And I could either just create groups and just however I want them, but in this case, I'm going to create them by chapter, and I'm going to say, you know what? I want a different group per chapter. I want to study all the words in chapter 1, then I want to study all the words in chapter 2, and I'm going to click create, and it's going to go through, and here we are. So in 1 Peter chapter 1, there's 69 words that meet my criteria. In 1 Peter chapter 2, there's 77 words that meet the criteria that I haven't seen yet in chapter 1. In chapter 3, there's 59 words that meet the criteria that I haven't seen yet in chapters 1 and 2. Again, just another way to create frequency lists that you could study from. Now, let's talk about the other way to create vocabulary lists. That's not using frequency, but rather choosing words individually. So I'm back on the vocabulary page, and I'm going to make a new list, edit, plus, create new list, and I'm going to call it my custom adjectives. And I won't spell any of that right, will I? My custom adjectives. And I click create, and I click done, and I click on it to go into it. And of course, there's nothing here. Now we'll create the groups, edit plus create new group. Now, instead of using the frequency items, I'm going to click manual list. Now we've got this field here that I can click in, and I can just start typing in. So I'm going to type kalos, enter, agathos. Notice I'm not typing these with diacritics, and although you can't see this, I'm just typing on my regular English keyboard. Because it says GR, Greek here, the program is transliterating into Greek letters. If you wonder what that looks like, click on the $, and it will show you the keyboard mapping. So to get an alpha, you type A. To get a beta, you type B. All these probably are pretty intuitive. Eta is H, theta is the Q, xi is C, psi is the J or the Y. Again, you'll find them, and you can always click type a $, to get this. So I'm going to hit close. Notice I've typed these without any diacritics. When I click add words, the program looks them up in the dictionary, and if it finds them, it puts them in here. But let's imagine it can't find them, that I type poneros. So I type it with this diphthong here, the epsilon iota. Now that's not correct. When I click add words, it's going to say, hey, I can't find this word. And if I typed 20 words, it would put all the ones it could find here, and any it couldn't find, it would leave. So I come back and go, oh no, that's not a diphthong. That's an eta. Add words. There we are. So I've got these 3 words, and I'm going to save this little group. I'm going to click save. I'm going to give it a name, adjectives, and I could do just what I did before. I can have one group of 3 words, 2 groups, or 3 groups. Obviously, I'm just going to have one group here. Click create, and here we go. Now we have adjectives with 3 words. And you can always edit groups, add and delete. I'm going to click on where it says examine 3 words, and then I'm going to do what I've done before. I'm going to click edit, and then plus. And here we are back again. And I could do another one. I could type in kakos. Add words. Notice now, instead of saying save, because we've come from inside a group, it says add. So I click enter, and sure enough, there it is. Kakos has been added to my list. So you can always create new groups, and you can always add words here in the manual list. Although I will admit it can be kind of a pain to have to type all these words. So there's a number of different ways you can get words into this list to use later. You can copy and paste. That's in fact how I made some of the vocabulary lists that exist in the program right now. That people had made vocabulary lists from these different textbooks, and I merely copied them into this field, hit add words, saved it as whatever the chapter was for that textbook. That works very well if you have access to copy and paste. That's a lot easier to do on a desktop, by the way, than a mobile app, but it still works. And since you can use the backup and synchronize, you can connect your mobile app to your desktop app. You can create new lists here by copying and pasting on, for instance, I'm working in Windows, and then you could transfer that if you wanted to your mobile app. So that's one option. You also have another option, which is, for instance, in the search page here, I've done a little search to find everything that ends in eta. So I've got 252 words that end in eta. Now, normally, if you look over here on the right, it says open in details. So if I click on this word, it goes to the details page that you should recognize. But if I click on open in details, it gives me some options. I can add the word to vocabulary, and I can add all the words to vocabulary. Let's choose add the word to vocabulary. Now, when I click on this line, notice it says, where do you want me to add words to? Well, there's only one option here. We'll talk about how to get more. That's the vocabulary creator field. That's what we've been working in. So I'm going to click OK. It says it's added. Now, let's come back to vocabulary, and notice there it is. There's the word we just had. And I could click add words, and I could click add, and there we are. We're good to go. Or, for instance, I could say, oh, you know what? I want to make a new group, and I'm going to come back in here to search, and I'm going to change it from open in details to all the words to vocabulary. Now, when I click anywhere here, it asks me, what do you want to do with those words? Again, we only have one option. That's the vocabulary creator field. Boom. They're all there. When I come back to the vocabulary and look in the manual lists, there they all are. and I'll click Add Words. It pulls them all in, and I'll click Save, and I'll call this Ends with Ada. Do I want one group of ends with Ada? I don't know. That seems like a lot. Let's make 20 groups of ends with Ada, but let's sort them randomly. We've seen all this before. We'll create, sure enough, here we are. We've got original adjective group, and now here's our ends with Ada group. And we've got 1 through 20. I called it ends with Ada, and the computer has stuck in dash and a number, and we've just got all these words that have been added. So you can always do that to add words. Also, did you notice, for instance, when I did open in details and I clicked on a word, the bottom says add the word to vocabulary. That's exactly the same as on the search page. If I click this blue line, it says, where do you want to add it? I want to add it to the vocabulary creator field. Then I come in here to vocabulary and I say, I'm going to examine this word and I want to add to it. And sure enough, there's the word we added. When you add words to this field, they'll stay here. They won't go away until you do something with them. So I'm going to say add the word, and then I'm going to add that to my list. And now, sure enough, I've added this word into my list of adjectives. So even though, of course, if you're noticing, it's not an adjective, it's a noun. So that's another way to get words into that vocabulary creator field so you then can deal with them. You can also, if you're interested, just add words directly to groups. If you notice here, every single vocabulary group, and this is true everywhere in the program, has got this little outline of a star. If you click on that outline, it fills in, and that means this is now a target for you to add words directly to. So let's go back to search, and let's change this. We'll say Greek words that end, and we'll say Omicron Sigma. Now, obviously, there's a lot of those. But this time, I'm going to go to Open with Details. I'm going to say Add Word to Vocabulary. And I'm going to look down here and say, oh, yeah, agamos. I want to add that to my list. So when I click on it, now notice I don't just have Vocabulary Creator field as an option. I also have the list I added. Remember, that list was called Adjectives. If I click here, boom, there it is. We go back to Vocabulary, Custom Adjectives. Here's my adjectives. Notice, there it is. Agamos has been added. It's been added directly to this list. So by clicking on this, you create it as a target that you can add words, either from the search field, or if you're reading along and you're like, oh, that's interesting. What is that? And I click on it. Oh, that's truth. And I come here and I say, oh, I want to add that to a list. So I have those options. Now, obviously, it's not an adjective, but I'm going to add it for fun just so we can see it. We go back to vocabulary, my custom adjectives. Notice now there's 7 words. We've added aletheia to our list as well. And you can do this for as many as you want. You know, I could come in here to 1 Peter and I could say, oh, I want to add some words to 1 Peter chapter 1, and I could come in here to Croy, the primer of biblical Greek. I don't know why you would want to do this since these are set for the textbook, but you could. And now notice we go to the search field. I tell it, add the word. When I click, there they all are. Adjectives, 1 Peter chapter 1, Corey chapter 2, and these are shown to you. Now I'm going to click away. If you click on the title or you click away, then nothing happens. These are shown to you in the order they appear here. So my custom adjectives is first, and it shows us that one first. Then 1 Peter is next, so it shows that one next. Watch what happens. I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to pull Croy all the way to the top. So now the one we starred in Croy is at the top. And sure enough, when I go in the search page and I say add word to vocabulary and I click on a word, then look, Corey, that's at the top, then adjectives, then 1 Peter. So that is another way that you can add words to vocabulary lists. And these aren't mutually exclusive. You could come in here and you could create a new list that starts out as being a function list. Let's say Mark chapter 16, and we just want all the words that only appear one time, and we create the list. And okay, there's 116 words that appear one time in Mark chapter 16, which is to say they don't appear more than twice in the chapter. And we could save that and give this a new name. Right? We're just going to pick one giant group of 116. But then later, if we click on it, we could come in here. We could add it, and we could just add another word. We could say, oh, I don't think Kalos was in there, and I want to add that. So I'm going to add Kalos, and I'm going to add it. And then if we scroll down through Mark 16, sure enough, there it is. So these are additional ways that you can add words. You can create your own vocabulary lists. I hope using this will help you as you study your vocabulary in the Greek New Testament Study app.